putting my slot from the morning to the afternoon is obviously giving me a challenge, because after all these high-profile speakers this morning, and you working very hard and having a good meal, now how could I keep your attention? Anyway, so I have to try to make it interesting. Try to make it interesting, I will start with what I will not talk about. It's not here in my brief, but I will just explain what I'm not talking about. But it's probably a clue to Richard what to talk about next during one of the next logistics summits. I will not talk about IOR, importer of record issues, which are closely associated with the internet trade. And I think you heard about that is one of the growing industries. It's all for brevity of time. So I have to focus actually a little bit more on challenges and opportunities here in the Philippines. I will also not talk about cabotage. Cabotage is another hot iron, closely associated with the high cost of transportation within the Philippines. If I talk about cabotage, I would have to talk about what makes transportation here in the Philippines very expensive. And I can tell you from a position of trying to make the point, opening the trade to foreign competition, I also had to learn that much has to be done to make costs, to lower costs for the local shipping industry. But we don't have time for that today. I will also be very, especially after the excellent introduction, a nice, beautiful and nice introduction of Richard. Yeah, I can be very brief on Royal Cargo, so we will keep the advertisement a bit down. So let's start at yet another, but perhaps a very simple definition of logistics. So how do I go to the next one here? That's my definition of logistics. I got that from my favorite science IT application in my iPad. It simply means deliver what's needed on time. While the word has French roots, its first known use dates back to the Victorian era in 1879. Until about 2000, it was primarily used by the militaries of this world, probably for its precise simplicity of expression, and while wide in its application, difficulty to achieve implied mission. And that mission will stay with us and expand in volume, scope, and sophistication, at least until home 3D printers linked to networks of liquefied materials will produce all you need and can through the internet. Until then, you need logistics provider delivering the goods. That much to my simple definition of logistics. Now let me briefly introduce our Philippine Royal Cargo organization. We are Philippine headquartered, as Richard mentioned, and we will address some of today's real opportunities and challenges in the Philippine setting and highlight the enormous opportunities and a few challenges brought by the formation and integration of the ASEAN market, AEC, ASEAN Economic Community. So, Royal Cargo, who we are and how we move you. We have a geographical reach, which was mentioned by Richard as well. We are where you need us, domestic and internationally, with own offices as displayed and dedicated agents elsewhere. We are invested. This is our domestic network. Before you saw our international network. Let's just go back a little bit. One flag is missing, and that's the one of the United States, because we just bought a small company in the United States West Coast. Here we are in the Philippines. Now, we are invested in assets with a heavy concentration in the Philippines. Just in the last 3 years, we invested over $35 million in equipment and real estate here in the Philippines alone. We are proudly a Philippine yet global company with over $100 million sales of services and sound financial strengths, global presence, economics of scale, so we can compete with the best of the world. Besides being asset-based, we believe in specialization and differentiation as the drivers of our success and acceptance by our customers. We manage supply chains, deliver what's needed on time, and do this on well-defined, agreed-upon scopes and liabilities. We are a market leader in the delivery of infrastructure and manufacturing plant projects, including the professional deliveries of heavy and ultra-heavy items of up to 1,000-ton individual weight. We are engaged in pharmaceutical warehousing and distribution. We manage cold chains through owned cold store facilities and equipment. We operate a bonded air express customs clearance facility with fixed customs release cycle times. We transport chemical liquids through isotanks and other liquids in flexi-tanks. We sell and export logistics-related BPO services. We offer IOR and internet trade fulfillment services. And we have unique IT solutions. And some of those were mentioned this morning. So we are partially there already, and we are driving and developing other interesting IT solutions as we go along. So we do have automated POD with status updates through cell phones, indicating the GPS position at the time of delivery. And we have interactive SMS status reports as well. So now, let's go to the Philippines' concerns and opportunities, the challenges. And here we go back to the port crisis, of course. Talking about the port. Now let me try a different tack, a different way of addressing that. Talking about the port reminds me of the story where different parts of the body argued about who is boss. And the brain claimed that certainly it was the boss, as it was doing all the thinking and it was governing the rest. With the heart contesting this as being the heart of things, and as a supplier of blood and energy to all, it ought to be the boss. All other organs chimed in with similar claims, annoying the port, which, disturbed by the cacophony of voices, simply shut down and closed up. Initially, nothing happened, but then the discomfort grew. By the hour, and soon to unbearable levels, until everyone recognized the port as one of the very and essential parts of the whole organism, making sure it always should be able to do its job and keeping things moving to the whole body's big relief. But jokes aside, productivity of all is a key issue of satisfying the demands and requirements of port users and their customers. The shipping lines, the port itself, the government agencies therein, the logistics and trucking companies, container yards, and last but definitely not least, the importers. Now look at that. I will not go into much into the details of that, just a few comments later, but this supply chain bottleneck has been produced by a group of leading transportation sector organizations. They have recently published it titled Port and Road Infrastructure for Greater Luzon Trade, to illustrate the actual and potential supply chain bottlenecks. I'm showing here the illustration with a few additions marked in green. The ones which are marked in green, there is on the right side under factories. I put that in, restrictive receiving time schedule, bobtailing and waiting time. This is addressing you as importers, because the importers, just like the ships, the port, the road operators, the truckers, the warehouse container yard operators, but also the consignees have to do their share and come to the table in resolving this issue. And if you restrict the receiving time for your cargo, or if you if you request too much bobtailing, meaning cutting off of the container deliveries at your factories for eventual pickup at a later time, or if you are keeping the trucks waiting for too long, it also has effects on the supply chain of the whole country. As our recent experience have shown, the following sequence of events and restrictions have led to the port malaise and constipation. The Christmas truck holiday of 2013 started it, in my opinion. The MMDA truck ban and the expansion of the same by 1 hour in the morning or in the evening, for me, was the crucial point which took the productivity out of trucking. It was not the imposition of the so-called daytime truck ban of Mr. Estrada. Actually, that came later, and it just, provided the straw which broke the camel's back. And in true sense, it was only implemented for a few days in its full implication. But then, I mentioned already, Manila daytime truck ban followed, drive against unfranchised trucks, new importer accreditation regulations, strict enforcement of truck weight restriction, more or less in the same time period and in combination with a change in the import-export cargo mix. Now, the interlocking complexities of associated causes and effects should be well understood to find a lasting solution. Otherwise, the mission of logistics to deliver what's needed on time is grossly missed at great cost to the economy of the Philippines, as we also heard this morning. Yet, a recent study mentioned in port calls reported that without the hindrance of any road regulation, the capacity utilization of both MICT as well as South Harbor would be below 80%. In other words, it's not the handling capacity of the port operators, and I think that was also confirmed this morning by Christian in his presentation. The issue is not the ports or the port capacity. The rapid development of the BPO and KPO business, now employing 1 million people at a fairly good income range in combination with increased remittances by overseas Filipinos, have funded increased consumer spending, correspondingly increasing the shipments of consumer goods to the Philippines, where exports account for only 48.4% of GDP in 2012, as per the World Bank report. In contrast to Thailand's 78% and Malaysia's 87%. So due to more money and jobs available for Filipinos and more consumer goods entering the market against limited exports, the resulting container imbalance contributed to the experienced problems in our Luzon ports. While, as mentioned, capacity of the ports is not really the problem, maintaining truck efficiency level of at least 20 deliveries per truck per month out of the Manila port is. Against a peak of previously 25 truck moves per month prior to the increased restrictions, we have at present recovered to about 13 to 15 deliveries from a lowest low of about 10 at the height of the crisis. So this is the root cause. You also have to understand that if your productivity per truck goes down from 25 to 10, that means instead of needing about 8,000 trucks to deliver all the containers from the port of Manila, you need about 20 to 21,000 trucks. Now these trucks at that time and even now were and are not available. So undelivered cargo, by the unsatisfied need of more truck units and the increased imbalance of import-export trade, causing a glut of empty containers for which no sufficient space was found, challenged the capabilities of the port to handle the traffic. This is actually what clogged up the ports. But it's not all bad news. The government has realized the importance of the port and given it top-level attention. Let's recognize the improvements made, but also show what still needs to be addressed and resolved. So what have we achieved? 20/7 straight truck lines. Before, you did not have straight routes. Before, we could not use Rojas Boulevard for trucking. Now we can. The Manila daytime truck ban, as you all know, was lifted. The LTFRB, the licensing body of the government for trucks, sped up the processing of franchises. Well, before it took 8 months to 2 years to get the franchise, and by now, I think it takes about 2 to 3 months. For me, that's still 1 to 2 months too long, but anyway, it was a big improvement. Increased utilization of the ports of Batangas and Subic, but as Chris said, Batangas is about 10% of Manila, and Subic is about 20% of Manila. So it will quickly clog up too, and Batangas by now is as congested as the MICT and the South Harbor. ICTSI's commitment to reactivate its rail-connected ICD in Laguna, adding 250,000 TEU handling capacity to the port, whose development is ongoing. You have heard about that this morning as well. So things are happening, but it's not enough, and more needs to be done. So what can be done? What can be done to resolve this? Not yet done. BIR clearances for import clearance certificates are still difficult to obtain, leaving some importers unable to clear their goods or import at all. There have been quite a number of meetings between BIR and importers, and BIR insiders themselves have pointed out to a host of documentation which actually is not really needed. But it hasn't been simplified yet, and some importers still cannot get their goods. Now, midnight expiration of gate passes delivery orders are not addressed. You probably don't know that, but the delivery orders are expiring at midnight for, let's say, the last mile or the last day calculation of storage fees and demurrage charges. This is setting a process into effect which is delaying the deliveries of container by another 1 or 2 days. This needs to go. Chris also mentioned that this morning, and he said it was their responsibility to have it changed. Expanded, and here the most important, the expanded MMDA truck ban is not yet lifted. It's still there. So the root cause of the congestion, the expansion of 1 hour in the morning and in the evening, which took about 40 to 50% out of truck productivity, is still there. What has been lifted was the Estrada daytime truck ban of the city of Manila. What needs to go is the expanded MMDA truck ban. Ban the bans. So the issuance of provisional LTFRB franchises was discontinued. What I mentioned on the positive side, that the processing of franchises is now faster, but the quick fix in between to issue provisional LTFRB franchises was discontinued. We still need more trucks, actually, especially right now. We had a press conference just about 2 weeks ago where I said the next 8 weeks are crucial because of the rush of importation for the Christmas business. And a lot of people actually have pending applications for franchises with the LTFRB. They should do something about it. Batangas Port to increase its handling facility and number of cranes and regain control of subleased port areas. Batangas is 10%. They have a big area actually which could be used, but they have only 2 container cranes. You put in 2 additional container cranes, which probably could be put in within the course of 1 year, and you double the capacity of Batangas. The applicability of considering trucking as a public franchise under the Public Service Law and Public Service Act hasn't been reviewed or challenged in court. The question there is trucking really a public utility, or is it a business-to-business transaction? Now, the EO designating the Subic and Batangas ports, and it was mentioned also this morning as subports of Manila, still has no implementing guidelines and directives as to who has to pay for the transportation between ports and subports. While shipping lines push for the extension of the 150 days tax-free dwell time in the Philippines for their empty containers, logistics providers and importers are interested for the shipping lines to remove their empty containers from the country in even a much shorter period of time. There, we would like, as chambers, we would like to challenge the shipping lines to get the empty containers out, to decongest our ports and container yards which are full to the brim. Now, the legal liabilities of shipping lines for the acceptance of empty containers once tendered by importers for return are unclear and seemingly not yet tested in courts. At the same time, demurrage and detention charges for late returns are unregulated and unabatedly collected. My personal point on that one is, if shipping lines are charging demurrage and storage charges, demurrage and detention charges, they should assume some liability for accepting empty containers which are tendered back on time by importers. Okay, and last not least, dedicated skyway feeder road connecting to S-legs, N-legs to facilitate present volumes and increased cargo movements once Pier 7 is operating are not yet planned and designed. For us, there is a link while the port is expanding. Chris mentioned that this morning. They want to expand Pier 7. What is very much needed is the infrastructure to and from the port. Because what does it do expanding the port itself, who has sufficient capacity already right now as a port, not as an empty container yard, of course, but as a port? It only makes sense to really expand that port when at the same time we put the infrastructure in place to and from the port and remove the hindrances to the free flow of trade. Now to the opportunities. So moving over to opportunities, but still connected to the same subject matter, is one of the most important and pending bills in Congress and Senate. It is the revised Customs Code, which once adopted and signed into law, will provide significant procedure improvements and a platform for a hassle-free, more efficient, and yet more effective customs department. Passing the Customs Modernization and Tariff Bill, CTMA, into law will enact the following reforms, amongst others. The revised Customs Code will implement rules and align Philippine customs procedures to the revised Kyoto Convention for simplification of customs procedures globally. A convention the Philippines has co-signed and which Congress and Senate have ratified in a resolution adopted and passed in February 1, 2010. The bill includes the definition and provision for transshipment free from customs duty, its period and extension. Overtime pay of customs personnel will not be charged to the public, and it will be the Bureau of Customs that will pay overtime for its personnel. Importers will be free to make and file their own customs entry without the need of engaging a customs brokerage company or practitioner. And this from somebody who is providing the service. Now, regulated importations and exportations as defined will be no longer penalized in the same manner as fraudulent and prohibited importations and exportations, but the goods will not be released unless compliance and submission of prior importation or exportation permits by the required government agencies are submitted. The problem with the present load port survey report is that just by being delayed in submitting the report, the importer is subject to, I would say, confiscatory penalties, because I think for the first infraction it's 30% of the value of the goods, and it goes as high as 80% of the value of the goods. That will not be the case anymore under the new customs code. The substitute bill does not impose confiscatory penalties for lack of documentation for importation that needs prior permission of other government agencies. If there is only failure to comply with the administrative requirements, penalties may be imposed, though, by the regulating agencies. But this kind of penalties is much less than the Bureau of Customs imposed. Under the substitute bill, there is no authority conferred to customs to regulate charges and fees that operators of customs-bonded warehouses will charge to the public. It will open it up to competition. The only authority granted to customs is the control, direction, and management of customs-bonded warehouses, so that insofar as these customs-bonded warehouses stored imported goods subject to payment of duties and taxes. This will introduce competition instead of cartel-like pricing of these services as experienced right now. I just draw your attention to what is happening at the airports in this aspect. In our opinion, customs has no business to be in business because they are not running warehouses, but they are regulating the fees right now. This again will not be possible or is not foreseen to be under the revised customs code. Again, I have to draw your attention. I'm not making announcements now of a new law. This is a pending bill. It is a priority bill, and the chambers will have a very important meeting tomorrow with the leadership of the House, and we will be drawing the attention of the leadership of the House that this Customs Modernization Act is one of our legislative priorities. Okay, the bill does not yet include a provision to, well, it does include a provision actually to increase the de minimis, which is, let me explain that. De minimis in this context is defined as the threshold value for traded goods below which no duty or tax is charged and clearance procedures are waived or reduced to the minimum. This value is currently unrealistically and against commitments made by the Philippine government towards foreign trade partners set at 10 peso per shipment, but increasing it to 5,000 peso is under consideration. Now actually I think it is set already at 5,000, and the commitment made in a trade agreement with the United States was supposed to be $200, which is more like 9,000 pesos. So we are not yet exactly there, but I think it would be realistic to assume that the de minimi will be set at 5,000 peso, up from 10 peso right now. All right, that much to customs. So let me lose a few words on the ASEAN equation and some global trends. I will liberally quote McKinsey's report about ASEAN at the crossroads, having culled data and issues relating to our trade out of its almost 200 pages. Reading the whole report is highly recommended. The ASEAN nations, in posting strong growth since 2000, are lifting millions out of poverty. While many gaps and disparities remain, with the right catalysts in place, it will provide unique opportunities for even more dynamic and inclusive growth. In a recent extensive study, McKinsey concluded that the change in global trade flows, urbanization, and what they call disruptive technologies could provide the keys. One of the questions this morning was, what are the 5 most important changes we can look forward to? What kind of technologies are coming up? And I think some of these disruptive technologies I will talk about are probably some of them. A vastly growing intra-Asian and ASEAN trade will result in yet bigger shares of global trade and create a single market of 600 million consumers. As labor and other costs increase in China and investors facing a less favorable investment climate, business will and has already started to gravitate towards ASEAN countries. I heard the expression this morning of VIP, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines. With us now left a little bit out because of the present problems we have with our ports. With China posting a 19% compounded annual growth rate in wages since 2007 and shifting towards an internal market economy with less reliance on exports, ASEAN has the opportunity to capture a bigger share of global manufacturing. As a single country, ASEAN, with a combined government debt of only less than 50% of a 2.4 trillion GDP, would be the 7th largest economy in the world, 25% larger than India's in 2013, home to more people than the European Union, or the United States, and after China and India with the third biggest labor force on earth. Its population is youthful against aging ones in Europe and the United States and Japan, yet so far it moves only 24% of its trade intra-regional against 40% within North Americans NAFTA and 59% in the European Union. We have seen that as logistics provider. There was next to no intra-Asia trade when I started in the business. Okay, that was 35 years ago. But even 10, 15 years ago, there was hardly any. And in the last 15 years, it has grown to about 24%. But the European Union has 59% intra-European Union trade, and North America is 40%. So there is still a lot to be developed. With continuing urbanization, McKinsey expects the consuming class to double up to 163 million by 2013. Keeping track with this pace will require $7 trillion in last not least logistics-related infrastructure investments. Did we get that right? That's not $7 trillion in infrastructure-related investment, but some of it certainly is. And we do need a lot of investments in logistics as, again, the growth pains which we are experiencing right now have shown. Now, let's look at those so-called disruptive technologies. McKinsey sees opportunities in what they call disruptive technologies, which they expect to produce up to 625 billion in annual economic value by 2025. Here they are: mobile internet overcomes geographical barriers, widens access to information, products and services to rural population. And we have a lot of rural populations in Indonesia particularly, and also the Philippines. Mobile banking, mobile payment, telemedicine, digital learning, etc. This is all associated with mobile internet. That's one of the game changers. Another one, big data. Big data analytics will supply insights on trends and better understanding of micro-segments of markets. Many ASEAN countries are on a low starting point regarding data collection and usage. Uses include improved functions in tax collection, procurement and disaster response, and better healthcare by sharing data and analytics. The other one is Internet of Things. Sensors and actuators will supply insights on trends. Sensors and actuators embedded in machines or other physical objects, even the human body in future probably, interacting with each other and the internet. Radio frequency identification tags, RFIDs on containers or boxes, for example, track cargoes wherever from and to. GPS-enabled telematics manage fleets and distribution networks in real time. Very important in ASEAN's highly fragmented supply chain. Smart storage and tracking systems will reduce food spoilage. Then, automation of knowledge works, advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning and voice recognition will automate many tasks now regarded as impossible for machines. It can go a long way filling gaps of availability of skilled workers or empowering workers with less training. Education systems can support teachers. The cloud. As cost of cloud computing comes down, companies will gain access to sophisticated pay-as-you-go access to data storage, basic software, and complete enterprise systems without tying up too much capital in expensive IT systems. One of the reasons why our company can compete with giant global players is that we have access to state-of-the-art IT systems right now from the globe, exactly on a pay-as-you-go base. We are paying per usage, per person, per module, per month. And we are updated in that application. So with such bright prospects, where are ASEAN's challenging impacting on trade and transportation? International competition will intensify, and on productivity of labor in a monetary sense, ASEAN's countries have to shape up. In 2012, Vietnam's labor productivity, as you can see here, was only 7% of China. Technology-driven automation will eliminate some clerical functions and customer service jobs, with laborers having to adapt and learn new skills to carry out higher value tasks. It's simply some of the countries here are producing higher value goods. It doesn't mean that people are less productive. They are probably producing the same volume of commodities, but lower priced ones. You have to move up in the value scale. Without careful planning and investments in infrastructures, cities can develop slums, gridlock, and overburden public services that choke off economic growth. These are the challenges. The ASEAN partnership has by now shifted from trade liberalization to trade facilitation. The WTO defines it as the simplification and harmonization of international trade procedures. And I mentioned that as an opportunity with passing the reformed customs bill. Now the problem is that customs officers with ulterior motives may not seem it in their interest to pursue such streamlining and facilitation, as the opportunities for illicit income through bribery and extortion are directly related to the greater complexity of procedures. We did have that problem in the past. I did make quite positive remarks on what is going on in customs right now, and we sincerely hope we don't go down the same lane again. Decisive reforms towards IT automation, integrity, and reduction of human intervention are needed and having been successfully initiated here in the Philippines, for example. In 2012, the flow of goods, services, and trade have reached $28 trillion, which were 36% of the global GDP. I'm talking about ASEAN here. That was 1.5 times the volume of 1990. So from 1990 to now, ASEAN has produced 1.5 times the volume of trade. And that current flow could triple, is estimated to be potentially triple as early as 2025. ASEAN is well positioned to benefit from all types of global flows, with expectations of by 2025 already more than half of the world's consumers are living within a 5-hour flight of Myanmar. So if you put Myanmar in the center and you fly 5 hours in each direction, you cover more than half of the world's consumers. Our logistics business, as all other trade, need to plan its strategies well to harvest the mentioned opportunities and address the associated risks. Companies moving quickly to seize those opportunities can secure advantages lasting for decades. Royal Cargo doesn't only have the intention, but is well on its way as a Philippine company to compete with the best in the world, harvesting these opportunities and deliver what's needed on time. Thank you.